Okay, we are going to talk a little bit about three of the possible selection tools at this point that you can use in Photoshop. So normally we're in the Move tool here in the toolbar here, and so you can see we currently have a background of a basketball, and what I'd like is the white part of the basketball to go away so that we just have this basketball selected. The most basic tool to use is something called the Marquee Tool. I'm clicking and holding it over here, as you can see, and I have two choices. I have the rectangular marquee or the elliptical marquee. I'm going to select obviously the elliptical one, but they both work in the same way. By selecting the elliptical, that allows me to create a selection that looks like an ellipse, and just select that. Now, as you can see, that might be a little difficult because you don't know where to select. So there are some tricks to using this tool effectively. The first one is obviously I would like this selection to be a basketball that's perfectly circular. So in order to create a perfect circle, I hold the shift key down, and you can see now that my shift key is being held down. The marquee tool is creating a perfect circle. Okay, I'm going to deselect, Command D, just to get rid of this. Another key that you should be aware of is the space bar. So if I hold the shift key, I make the perfect circle, but if I hold the shift key and the space bar, this allows me to move the marquee with the space bar being held down, and then I let go of the space bar, and now I can continue to resize that or reshape. So for instance, I would hold the space bar, make this circle a little bigger, hold the space bar like until I have, and I let go, and you can see the marching ants all around the basketball, hugging the basketball and having selected it. If you make a mistake, or if you need to make the selection, you can see it's a little bit too big, you can always go to select and then modify the selection, and in this case I'm going to contract the selection by maybe 4 pixels, and you can see now it is small enough where it actually does not have that white element selected. So this is how I select the ball, but what do I do next? Well, there are a couple things you can do to actually take this selection away from the background. The first thing is, because you have something selected, you can then jump the layer or create a new layer based on the selection just by selecting Command J. And you'll notice now, if I turn off my background, that I now have a perfectly good selection, a good ball, and it is actually on its own layer with transparent background. So that's one way to do it. This way you have the original available to you if you need it, and this is ready for exporting into Motion. Okay, the next way we're going to go about selecting something is a little bit magic. It's called the Quick Selection tool. That's right under the under the Marquee tool. So go down to the 4th tool down and select Quick Select, or W. The way this tool works, it's like a brush, and I'm going to zoom in, Command++, and you can see that I have, like, in essence, a little brush tool, and using the brush tool shortcuts, left and right bracket, you can make this bigger or smaller. And the way this works is you're, in essence, painting the selection. So I'm going to zoom out so you can see I'm just painting the things I want. Now this does a pretty good job, as you can see, of selecting what you want. I've currently just painted a little bit of the area of the toaster, and I got pretty much what I needed. There is this little back area that didn't get selected, and you notice that my brush is too big to select it, so I'm going to make my brush smaller, and now I can go over that, and you can see now the selection's made. If I make a mistake and accidentally, or if the selection has a mistake in it, I'm looking for a mistake here, but I don't see one. But if you do have a mistake, like for instance, maybe this part shouldn't be selected, or maybe you want the shadow as well, and it's not selected, again, just by clicking on the area that is not selected and being very careful not to go over that area, you can make a selection. Now, for instance, the computer did not understand that this shadow ended, and so now it's selected all this area. To deselect this, I'm holding the Option key, and notice that my cursor changes from a plus to a minus on that selection tool. By holding the Option key down, I can now deselect this area, and notice the computer is now trying to figure out what I really want. And so I'm now taking away from the selection until I have just the perfect toaster selected. And then again, I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to Command J to jump that to a new layer and just check my selection. If it's good, great. Otherwise, undo. I'm going to zoom out. Undo, Command Z, and now you should still have the selection if you just undid it. There it is. And now you can go into select, modify, and maybe you want to contract the selection or expand it depending on what happened. And now I've contracted it a little bit, so I got a little bit less of that outline of white. And now I'm going to jump that to a new layer and Command J. And now I have the toaster selected with the underlying area here. Obviously, in the past, we've used the ability just to erase things away. That's another way to select an object. So let's take a look. We've got our ball. Now here's a selection that would be more difficult. Obviously, if we tried to use our new tool, the magic wand, or the quick select, this would try to pick the right things, but you can kind of see it gets very confused, and the blue clearly is going to be selected in this case. It's a really impossible selection. What we want is just a tree, for instance. So the other way to select is by selecting something that is a specific color. We've done this in the past, but you go to Select, Color Range, and what we're going to do in this case, because we know that there is a solid color of blue, we're going to select the blue just by clicking somewhere we know there is blue. And you notice by clicking somewhere, it just starts the selection. Currently, my selection is set to black mask. Sometimes it's set to none, and then you just have to look at the mask here. But you can kind of see by clicking here, I can select different things. I could select the green for the tree. That'll give me something, but maybe it won't give me enough of the tree. Obviously, the base of the tree is missing. So I'm going to dial this fuzziness down a little bit. The way this works is I'm going to select the blue, and you can see that's not enough of the blue selected. So I'm going to hold the Shift key down to create additional color selections. And I'm going to just be clicking here. I'm click, 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 until, in fact, I'm going to click and hold and just swipe across. And now you see that I've selected almost everything that's blue, with the exception of these little striads right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and just select those as well. Now my fuzziness is at 23. Once I have a really, really good selection, I can then up the fuzziness maybe to a little higher number. Let's go ahead and do that. Come on, fuzziness. And you can kind of see that has now made a perfect white knockout of the tree. And now I'm going to just show you what this looks like. Just hit OK. Computer's running really slow. It's like a little bit behind. And I have hit OK, and come on. There it is. And now you can see the selection of the tree has been made. Again, I'm going to Command J to jump that to a layer, turn that off, and you can see the problem. The problem is I selected the thing that I could select with this tool, which was a solid color, but I really wanted the opposite. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z 2 times, and because I know I've selected the blue, I'm going to go up to Select, and I'm going to invert the selection. So I'm going to select, inverse, and that swaps the selection and makes it opposite. And now when I jump the layer, Command J, and open this up, now you see I have a pretty good selection of the tree with a nice background that's transparent. So that's a third way of selecting something. Each thing that you bring into Photoshop will have its own specific best way or best practice for selection. So for instance, this wheelbarrow, probably the white would be something to select. So select color range, pick white, make sure that your fuzziness is down as much as possible because you can see this reflection is being picked up. If it's too fuzzy, you saw that right here and here, that means you won't have selected it. But hit OK. And now you can see with very little effort, you do have a selection, but it's not perfect. You can see the white is here. Another possibility, Command D to deselect, would be to use the magic wand, right? And then just, the quick select, and then deselect, Command D, and then just draw in the selection, being very careful not to go outside the lines. And remember, you can, if your brush is too big, like this, you can't select because you'll select everything. You see that? So you want to make sure the brush is small enough where it's not going to go outside of your selection. If you accidentally go outside of the selection, you can undo, Command Z, or you can again hold the Option key down and deselect the area that you accidentally selected. But best is to do it without selecting it in the first place. And you can see I'm pretty happy with this selection. It looks like a lot better. Pretty much has everything. So if I jump this and see my selection, Command 0, you can see that's a much better selection with, even though the background was white, it wasn't perfectly white. And also it would have picked up some of the white highlights as well. This selection can only probably be done with the quick selection because the background is very difficult and not one constant color. And there might be some gray in his face or his jacket or something. So again, with the quick selection, I make the brush really big, zoom out, and I just swipe down and then click on his head, click on his hair, click here, and then I look for areas that are not selected. You can see his chin is not selected, so I make the brush a little smaller, and then I select his chin, make sure his ear is selected. Sometimes those get left off. Looking down, looking all around, here's an area that wasn't selected, I'll click that. His hand wasn't selected, so I might want that. And I'm clicking, and that's it. So it looks like that's a pretty good selection. Jump it, see if I got a good selection, turn off the background. And oh, there's something I missed, right? So I undo a couple times, and then I just go back to my selection tool and select it in. Again, make sure the selection is good before moving on. So now I have that. You see his face is a little bit problematic. So again, I'll undo, and I can zoom in and see what the problem is. And it is a little bit of a weirdness. This selection went over here, so I'm going to hold the Option key down and kind of trim that off. I don't know what that is, but maybe that just doesn't need to be on his face. And then you can see this part got cut in, so I'm going to select. So holding the Option key removes, Shift just leaving it, but without the Option key, select adds to the selection. So I'm adding to the selection, and remember his face is important. So just getting that perfect will be great. There we go. And now I'm jumping him to a new layer, turning off that, and that's a lot better, especially from this distance. So everything else is selected. So that's it. A little bit on how to select in Photoshop. There are lots of other ways to do this. Obviously, one of the ways that you learned in class was just to select something that was available and just use the eraser tool to erase everything you don't like. And there is one more thing. So for instance, I would like to delete this shadow. I have grown out of love of it. And another tool is the lasso tool, Polygon. And by selecting that, it allows you to click, and create an actual polygon object that you can actually use to copy, jump, or delete. So for instance, in this case, I'm going to deselect, Command D, and I'm going to go here, click, and double click, and that selected this area. Now, because I'm on this layer, I can hit the delete key, and that has now deleted the shadow along with these other lines. So the polygon lasso is a little bit like the Marquee tool in that you can select different parts, and if you need to, then jump them. It's a very quick way to just select something really rough and put it on its own layer. And that's it.